The autumn wind carried the scent of rain and fallen leaves along the deserted waterfront of the small coastal town. Amelia stood by the old lighthouse, holding a yellowed letter that had arrived from the distant city where she had lived for the past several years. The paper was soft, as if memory itself had infused it with warmth. Meet me where the sea meets the sky, in 10 years. She walked slowly along the wet promenade, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves against the stones. Every moment reminded her of childhood, when she and James ran along these very streets, laughed at absurd stories, and dreamed little plans for the future. Time had passed, and they had parted ways, yet the letter made her heart race, reminding her that despite the distance, something had remained unchanged. When she lifted her gaze, James was already standing at the other end of the promenade. His hair was slightly longer, his face aged a little, but his eyes, those same deep, familiar eyes, seemed to reflect her own soul. Amelia's heart trembled as she stepped toward him. "Amelia," he exhaled, as if afraid the words would vanish into the air. "James," she answered, barely daring to believe it was really him. The wind wrapped around them as if trying to bind two hearts that had lived on opposite shores of life for 10 years. They stood in silence, simply looking at each other, and in that silence there was more meaning than any words could convey. The evening slowly turned into night. They strolled through the empty streets, talking about how life had changed them, the people they had lost, and the hopes that remained. Every word was charged with meaning, every touch of their hands a promise that despite the years apart, their bond endured. And though the night came to an end, and the dawn gradually painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, Amelia and James knew their meeting was but a fleeting moment, short and precious, yet capable of altering an entire life. Morning arrived, and James returned to his city, a sprawling, noisy metropolis full of obligations, opportunities, and strangers. Amelia remained in the coastal town, where life flowed slowly, almost unchanged. Each time they parted, her heart tightened, as if the space between them were infinite. They wrote letters, their calls were rare and brief. Each time Amelia received a letter, her hands trembled. Every phrase was precious, yet it left a lingering sadness, for reality always returned them to separation. With each passing decade, their meetings became rarer, yet each moment together grew deeper and more meaningful. They traveled to old places from their childhood, revisiting memories, laughing at how the world around them changed. The old lighthouse, the waterfront, the trees, all seemed familiar yet distant, as if the world reminded them that time moves on, and it is relentless. Every meeting tested their love. Friends who had once shared their joy were gone. Cities transformed, familiar streets vanished beneath new landscapes. And with every new separation, Amelia and James began to wonder, can love constrained by time and distance truly endure?
Another 10 years passed, and the next meeting of Amelia and James was set in an abandoned theater on the outskirts of the coastal town. When they entered the hall, it seemed surprisingly familiar, even though time had left its marks: dust on the seats, rusted chandeliers, tattered curtains. "You know," James began, examining the cracks on the walls, "every time we meet, it feels like time slows down, but then it slips away again." Amelia nodded. She touched his hand, and the warmth that radiated from him was just as strong as in their childhood. "We always lose days and years, James, but I don't want to lose you," she whispered. James held her hands firmly, as if trying to hold not just her, but all the years of separation. "I want us to stop counting days and years, but that means we have to choose. Either live only for these moments, leaving everything else behind, or try to make them eternal." Amelia felt her chest tighten. She knew that eternal love was not just beautiful words, it was a decision that could change their lives forever. It required sacrifices, careers, ordinary life, friends, the familiar world. They walked slowly through the theater, watching the rays of the setting sun filter through dusty windows. Every moment was at once beautiful and terrifying. "And if we try?" Amelia asked, looking at James with hope and fear intertwined. "If we don't try," he replied, "I'll always wonder what could have been." At that moment, they understood that to preserve their love, they would have to alter the natural course of life itself, risking everything for a fleeting moment that could become eternal. Their next meeting occurred 10 years later, and now both arrived with clarity. Love requires courage and sacrifice. They met in the old botanical garden where they had played as children. The trees had grown, flowers had changed, but the garden remained a place of magic and memory. Amelia took James' hand. "We can try," she said quietly, "but we must be ready for everything." James nodded. He understood that eternal love was not just happiness, but responsibility, a test for both of them. They decided to unite their lives. Each meeting was no longer a coincidence, but part of a plan, traveling not only through cities, but through years, establishing their own rules, their own reality. Their love became a force capable of bending time and space. Sometimes the world changed, friends passed away, cities became unfamiliar, familiar streets vanished beneath new landscapes. But each moment together was rich and meaningful. They understood true eternity is not measured in years, but in the quality of the moments we create together. At dusk, with the streetlights reflecting on the water, Amelia and James sat on a bench holding hands. "We did it," she whispered. "We made our moments eternal." "Yes," he replied, "but eternity requires courage every day, and I am ready to walk this path with you." At that moment they understood that love that endures decades of separation could withstand eternity, because it lives in every choice to be together, regardless of the world around them.
The following years became a test of their strength and attachment. No longer relying on chance, every meeting was carefully planned. Yet even planning could not predict how the world would change. Amelia watched as her hometown transformed. Old buildings disappeared. New skyscrapers rose. Streets became busy and unfamiliar. James spoke of the metropolis where he lived. Technology erased old habits. People rushed, forgetting what was important. But whenever they met, they created their own world, filled with laughter, long conversations, and starlit walks. "Every time we meet, the world around us changes," Amelia said, gazing at the reflections of the lights on the water. "Yet those changes cannot destroy what we have built," James replied. "Our moments become stronger than any time or distance." But the years taught them lessons. Separations became more painful, new circumstances more challenging, and people they loved left. Sometimes Amelia felt that their love was a light in a changing world, but one that could be extinguished. They began to wonder, are these fleeting moments enough, or must they try to make them eternal? It was during these years they realized their love could affect time itself. When they were together, hours seemed to slow. The world grew brighter and calmer. Understanding this was both wonderful and terrifying. Eternal love was not only happiness, but immense responsibility. One evening, 20 years after their first meeting, Amelia and James stood atop the hill where they first confessed their feelings. The sun set, painting the sky in gold and purple hues. "I no longer want our meetings to be fleeting," Amelia said, feeling the wind play with her hair. "I want every moment with you to last forever." James held her hands in his. His gaze was resolute. "But eternity is not just time, Amelia. It is a life full of trials, responsibility, and the unknown.
We must be willing to leave our familiar worlds to create a new, our world. They stood in silence, listening to the quiet of the hill where only the beating of their hearts seemed to exist. It was a trial, to risk everything for a moment that could become eternal. Amelia took a deep breath and nodded. "We are ready. We will make this choice together." At that moment, the light of the setting sun enveloped them, and the world around them seemed to pause. They felt time stretch into infinity. Their hearts intertwined, and they understood. Love that survived decades of separation could now endure eternity. And although the unknown lay ahead, each knew that together they could overcome any obstacle, time, distance, or the changing world. Their moments had become eternal, not through magic or power, but through the strength of their hearts and the willingness to stay together no matter what. As Amelia and James began turning their moments into eternity, the world around them began to shift. Cities they knew changed, familiar streets vanished, and time seemed to bend to their presence. Yet this power demanded a price. Amelia noticed the first signs of fatigue. Sleepless days became harder. Memories of the past grew dim. James felt the weight of responsibility. Every moment stretched into eternity required attention and strength of will. "We're meddling with the flow of time," Amelia said, sitting atop the hill where she had first confessed her love. "I'm afraid we'll lose not only the past but ourselves." "I'm afraid too," James admitted. "But if we don't try, we'll never know what our love could have become." They understood that eternity was not easily won. Their connection had become a trial, testing not only the world around them, but also themselves, their fears, doubts, and weaknesses. Yet, despite everything, every time their hands met, they felt a certainty. Love was worth any sacrifice. Years passed, and the world around them had transformed completely. Friends who once knew them were gone, cities had become unrecognizable, and familiar sounds felt foreign. Yet Amelia and James still found each other in every moment. They created their own little world, a secluded house on a hill overlooking the endless sea, where sunsets and sunrises seemed eternal. Each day was filled with simple joys, conversations, walks, cooking together. Yet even in this world, they faced the consequences of their choice. Moments of time stretched, and days sometimes blended together, creating a sense that past and present were intertwining. "I don't know how many days have passed," Amelia admitted, gazing at the sea. "But I know I want to spend them with you." "That's all that matters," James said. "The rest, let the world decide." They realized that true eternity is not in the number of days, but in the quality of moments they create together. With each day, their love grew deeper, stronger, and realer. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon and the sea reflected a rose-gold light, Amelia and James sat on a bench atop the hill. The wind whispered their names, and the world seemed both new and familiar. "We did it," Amelia whispered. "We found eternity." "But eternity is not the end," James replied. "It's every day, every moment we choose to spend together, and I will choose you again and again." They embraced, and in that moment the boundaries of time dissolved. Their love became a part of the world they had created. No separations, no fear, no limits of days or years. They understood that eternity was not magic or power, but the willingness to love regardless of all, to accept change, and to be together, even as the world around them shifted.